And I think that we'll go ahead and get started now. Might still have a few more people joining us, but it is time. So today, this is going to be a general overview of SMMware. My name is Brian with SMMware. We also have Liz Donovan, who is our accredited trainer on the session with us. And she is someone who can help with training. And she can also answer questions as we go if she cares to. We are starting here on the homepage of SMMware. So I go to clients and sales and down to manage sales leads. Here we have a listing of your sales leads. And at the top, we have a gray bar. This bar is a filter, and it lets you affect the listing down below. A sales lead has different status levels. These are customizable. Right now, I'm showing you all of the sales leads. And you can narrow it down to only the ones that you've won, the ones that you lost. You can have both the won and lost, so you can compare them, a few things like that. We also have a sales report where you can see the number of items in the system for a given status level, and also the total number of dollars that were quoted for it, plus the total number of hours. We also have this table over here that breaks it down by percentages, by value, by hours, and by quantity. One of the questions you want to ask yourself is whether you have a lot of small leads, do you have a few big leads, or somewhere in the middle? So that's the kind of information that our sales report can supply. But again, we came here because someone had called us and we wanted to create a sales lead. So I go to the new sales lead button. And I'll say that this is in progress. We have drop down for all the different clients. If this is a returning client, they would already be in this drop down. But we're going to assume this is somebody brand new. So I'll click on the plus sign. And you'll get a pop-up where you can enter information about them as a person as opposed to this particular sales lead. And SMMware distinguishes between multiple, you may have multiple sales leads for somebody over time, multiple jobs. So we have one record where you store things that don't change, like their name, and typically their email address and their cell phone number. And you'd finish all the information entering in here. I'd like to point out that we have a button for acting as a reference. It starts off as being unasked, and then from there it can be yes or no later on. We also have not just one, but 3 fields for who referred the business to you. That way, for our referral report, you can ask questions like, which industry category did our business come from? Realtors or senior living centers, things like that. We have a drop down. This is made up of all the entries you've put in the past. So every time you create a new, every time you type something new in here, the next time around it will appear in that drop down. And so for Danielle, there is no difference between an inquiry and a sales lead. When we first created the sales portion within SMMware, there was a lot of strong feelings about whether it should be called an inquiry or an estimate or a sales lead. So that is actually configurable. You can call it what you like. By default, a new SMMware system is going to call it a sales lead. And then for Danielle, you've got yours has been changed to say inquiry. And that's why yours is different. So going back to the referred by fields, we've got category, company, and person. So you can really break it down from the top level of category and drilling down to exactly which person. Down below that, we've got our custom fields. These labels can be anything you want. We've got up to 12 fields. And again, these are things about them as a person. It could be mobility issues, mental acuity. You should not get hung up on the exact labels that we're using here. These are just examples, and you would be able to put in whatever you want. But again, it probably would be appropriate for that to be information about them as a person. When we get back to the main sales lead, I'll talk a little bit about the custom fields you can see there. One of the nice features about SMMware is that if you deal with the same addresses on a regular basis, like senior living centers, we can arrange to have them all listed here in this dropdown, such that when you pick one, it will fill out the address for you. You don't have to memorize it or cut and paste it. And then you can just put in the suite number or apartment number, whatever is applicable. So I'll go ahead and save this new client record. And again, the idea is that you may work for somebody multiple times, and each time you have a sales lead, each time you have a job. So the client record is kind of the hub, and then you can have as many sales leads, as many jobs as applies. But now we're here back on the sales lead, and we've got our new client. And you can see that there are some custom fields here. And again, these are customizable. You can name them however you like. And these are more appropriate to have to do with the location, elevator code, or which day the garbage comes. These are things that change when people move from one place to the other. And once again, down at the bottom, you have the address dropdown so that you can easily get your address filled in without having to memorize it or cut and paste it. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate what it's like to work with the files, upload files. We have two file managers. Rather than have a single file manager and then you can indicate on a file by file basis that this one is restricted, this one is available for everybody in the company to see. We just give you one general file manager and one restricted file manager, and then it's very obvious that if it's under the restricted file manager, it's restricted. If it's under the regular one, then it's available for all the employees to see. We also offer these tags. The thinking here is that you would walk into a room, take some photos, and then you go to upload them, and you would assign them a tag. So here we are going to go ahead and select some photos. You'll notice that they have the long random file names that you would typically see from a mobile device. And when you're on a mobile device, you can upload the photos in the same way you can do multi-select. For Kathleen, you absolutely can customize the tags. Other examples of tags I've seen is before and after or donations. That way you can keep straight that those items are going to be donated, or you can compare the before and after. Another feature that SMMware offers is the auto rename. I mentioned before that the photos have those long random file names, and you can't really use those in conversation with people, not very conveniently. And the auto rename is going to use the tag as the base name, and then it's going to number them sequentially. So these photos are going to turn out with bedroom 1001, bedroom 1002, and so on. So I'll go ahead and upload those now. As they're being uploaded, they are actually being downsized from 3 or 4 megabytes down to about 100 kilobytes, which is still really good quality based on all the feedback I've gotten from everybody. There's actually a way to adjust how much downsizing is done, and so far nobody's felt like they needed higher quality than what we're already giving. And once you have the photos, you can click through the gallery back and forth. We also offer the ability to enter a note. So for here, we might say, all right, so we can write ourselves notes as we go. And you can also rotate them, change the tags, rename them. You can download it again if needs be. And you can, of course, delete it, and you can share it. I also point out you can see who uploaded it and when. Now, SMMware already knows the client. It has their email address, so you don't have to cut and paste anything. It's really just a question of saying, yes, I would like to share this with the client. And if I was to hit save, they would get their email with a link. You can also share it with, say, moving companies or other vendors. The contacts would appear here, and you would just simply pick them. And you can pick multiples. And again, if I hit save, they would get that. I'm just not going to hit save because I don't want to send out any emails right now. But that's what it's like to work with the file manager. The restricted file manager works the same way. And I will also mention while we're in the neighborhood that you can assign tasks and create notes here under the sales lead. So for Kathy, yes, you would be sharing the photos. It's not the entire client profile under a current configuration. So now I'd like to talk about sales quotes. Again, the sales lead is it's a bucket where you can put all the information that you gather during the sales process that is separate from the quote. The quote is, a document, here's what we're going to do for you, here's how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. And then the sales lead is all this other information like the photos. For Kathleen, the message for the sharing, it is I can't remember the exact labeling of it or the exact text, but it basically says here or click below to access your shares, and it has like your company name. So it's clearly coming from your company. All right, so looking at the quoting system, I'll start a new quote. Creating a quote within SMMware is a question of mixing and matching the various blocks that we provide. And here's a list of the kind of blocks. So there's a client block that's going to contain name, address, and phone number, and so on. There's a header block, which is large, bold text. And there's line item blocks. There's blocks for expenses, for the summary, and legal blocks. However, we also let you create quotes from templates, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to create a quote from the this 3-level template. It's 3 levels because the top level is this header, and then the second level is the room, and the third level is the line item. SMMware allows you to charge your client based on 2 different approaches. The simplest approach is when you charge the same rate for every hour on the job. We also have another approach where you have codes, and each code has a different rate with it. So that way you can charge a different rate for floor planning versus packing. You can charge different rates for employees who are brand new versus employees who are veterans, and so on and so forth. Or maybe you have one rate for when your employees are traveling to the client's home versus the rate that you charge once they're there. So there's quite a few different ways to use these job codes. And this particular example is generated where we're assuming it's the same rate. On this quote, everything that's in gray is something that is going to be calculated for you. And so it's not going to be directly editable. Everything that is not in gray is something that you can change. A common thread throughout SMMware is the philosophy of giving you a starting point and then allowing you to modify it from there. For Kathleen, once this webinar is over, the recording is going to be, you will get an email saying that you can watch it through the webinar software as a replay. And then we also mount it to the YouTube channel, our SMMware YouTube channel. So this will be available for your future viewing as well. You can, for people who missed it and for people who just want to review what was said. So again, this is an example of a quote, and these are the different kinds of blocks. These are the line item type blocks. This is a header block. This is just a text block. This is the summary block. You can see that all the different categories are summarized over here. And down below that is the legal block. And definitely don't get hung up on exactly this example of a quote. Like I said, all these different blocks can be mixed and matched any which way you see fit. So now that we've created a quote, you can view it as a PDF. And you would, of course, have your own image up here instead of this generic SMMware one. And when you take out a subscription to SMMware, it does come with us providing you with a custom theme where we take your logo and other graphic elements and create a nice image up here for you, both for your invoices and quotes and for your actual website. But again, this is the PDF that would be seen by your client. Another aspect of SMMware is the idea that clients will often ask you for a new version of a quote with some minor change or another. Maybe they're adding some work. So what we can do here is say we're going to copy this quote and save it. Now it's version 2. And we have this block right here. You'll notice that it's marked as private. And we can write ourselves a little note so that 3 months from now, we will know that we'll know the reasons why this other quote version exists. So I come back down from the quote to the sales lead, and you can see that we now have two versions of quotes. And as time goes by, you'll just build up as many as you create. And the thing here that I'm pointing out is that it's very obvious that these different versions of the quote belong to this sales lead. There are other systems where all the sales quotes for different clients are mixed together, and then you kind of have to thread through them to figure out that this is one version of the quote for this client, this is another version of the quote for this client. But in SMMware, those are gathered together, and it's obvious that they are related. For Stephen, there is a version where there's a configuration option where the line items then do not show the details of the charges, and then you just have the grand totals at the bottom. And that is something that we would be able to talk about if we looked at that version and there was something about it you didn't like, we would be able to talk about that as well. So coming back to our sales lead, I think we've gotten a pretty good introduction to those. So from here, I'm going to look at jobs. For Kathleen, you don't name the quote. The quote, you'll know which quote it is because it's underneath the sales lead and you can see the client's name. And then the quotes are just labeled as version 1, version 2. And then that private note that I showed you before would be an area where you can distinguish between them. Presumably the latest quote is probably, or the highest number quote is probably the latest and greatest version, but you can look at the individual notes if there's any confusion about that. So here we are looking at a job, and you can see that it was created from a particular sales lead. I would also mention that we have various shortcut buttons. So this is next to the client's name. There is a shortcut button that will take you to the client profile. And this shortcut button would take you to the sales lead. As we look down at the sales lead, it is mostly the same, or as we look down at the job, rather, you will notice that it's mostly the same as the sales lead. It doesn't have a field for who the lead salesperson is. Instead, it's got the field for the team lead. But other fields are the same, like the custom fields. And also the moving information, and we have a file manager. So the sales lead and the job are two sides of the same coin, and that's why they appear so similar when you look at them. From here, we'll go ahead and look at what it's like to enter hours. So now let's pretend that I am an employee, and I go to the associates. Your employees would have their own logins. They would go to the associate menu. I would also mention that as a lower level employee, I would not have access to nearly so many things. I'm logged in as an admin right now, so I've got carte blanche to going anywhere. But for instance, they wouldn't have the admin menu. So there's really a lot less for a regular employee to learn. Their learning curve is much less steep, than compared to an admin. And then for the admins, that's where we have our documentation and training. Let's look at the record my hours command. We go to associates, record my hours. And as an administrator, I can switch who I'm entering hours for. If I was a lower level employee, then I would simply not have that drop down, and any hours I enter would be on my own, under my own account. And for creating hours, naturally you have to say which day the work was done and for what job. Under this system, we're configured to enter the start time and the end time. You'll notice that you can mark it as billable or not. Over here for the description, you can simply type something in, or you can use this pop-up where you can customize it and put in your own terms. The idea here is that if you're on a phone, you can save yourself a little bit of that thumb typing with some predefined terms. For Kathy, the employee would have their phone at the job, and they can log in the SMMware and enter their hours right there from on the job. Oh no, the employees go to the associate menu and then enter my hours, and that's where we are right now, as opposed to going to the job profile and entering their hours from there. So for instance, our thinking was that you might work on one job in the morning, one job in the afternoon, and we have a single screen. I'm going to click on this Add New Row button. So if I worked on this job in the morning and this job in the afternoon, I can do them both from within the same screen. SMMware also supports the idea of paying employees for travel based on mileage, or for charging your clients for travel based on mileage. And it supports a formula where a certain number of miles, and it could be 0, but a certain number of miles are free. And then after that, the employee is paid or the client is charged a certain amount per mile. So then you would enter that mile here. And you'll notice that you can also enter break hours, which assumes that the employee is unpaid for that break. And that completes that particular entry. This area at the top, this is where you create your new entries. And then after you've created them, they will appear down here in the listing. From there, you can edit them and delete them and such. And if once they appear on an invoice, they won't be editable directly. You can still view them, but it'll tell you that it's on an invoice, and that's why it's not editable. Going back to the Associates menu, we go down to Record My Expenses. Once again, we have to put in the date and which job this was for. But in this case, we have to put in an amount. And we're going to choose which vendor we spent the money with. You notice that you can mark it as billable or not. You can upload a receipt. And once again, you put in a description, or you can use the predefined terms. And the last area I'll explain is this radio button, company versus reimbursable. If the company or if the employee paid for this using a company credit card, then you can go ahead and leave it at company. And if they paid out of pocket such that the employee needs to be reimbursed, then you would choose reimbursable. And that's what those radio buttons mean. Once again, we can add more rows and enter more than one expense at a given screen. All right, so again, the top area is where you would make new entries. The lower area is where you would see your existing entries. SMMware has an approval system such that it's optional, and the hours and expenses would have to be approved before they could be put onto an invoice. And this particular system has that turned on. And here's an expense that was approved by the system administrator, and that's why their name is there. So once it has been approved, then it can appear on an invoice, and you might see the invoice number there once it's been added to an invoice. And that is what it's like to enter your expenses. From here, I'm going to jump over and look at the Invoice Manager. And here's some invoices that are already in the system. I'll go ahead and look at one of these. So for Kathy, yes, you would take a photo of the receipt on your phone, and then you would upload it from that same expenses screen. All right, so here we are looking at an invoice. Invoices have different levels: preliminary, finalized. TL stands for team lead. So there's an approval step in SMMware. The thinking is that your team leads were on site, so they know what work was done and which employees were there. For Danielle, under the settings editor. So I have not yet introduced the settings editor, but now is a good time for that. So we go to admin and settings. I'm jumping over to the other tab where we can see the settings. And each one of these green stripes is a section that has a lot of settings underneath it. We try to give you defaults that will be a good starting point. And then once you get used to the system and you want to start tweaking things, then you can come here and start making changes. And the presets that you were referring to are under section 2. And here are the presets for expenses. And we're simply typing in the phrases and separating them with a vertical bar, and then that separates them into what you see on the drop-down. And if I wanted to actually make a change, I would hit Edit and go through the process there. You can see that there's basic settings here for the name of the company and how long you want people to be able to stay logged in for before they get timed out for inactivity. There's a whole bunch of settings in each section. Here's the calendar section that defines a variety of configuration options. There's too many of them for me to go into on an individual basis, but suffice it to say there's quite a few ways that you can customize SMMware to your liking. All right, so if we're okay, then I'm going to jump back to the Invoice Manager and keep explaining about that. Right now, this particular invoice is called Team Lead Approved, which is right before being sent to the client and then finally paid. We have one note that will appear on the invoice that the client would see. We have a note that is private, so there's where you can write things that you don't necessarily want the client to see. And keeping with the idea of not having to cut and paste addresses, we have the list of where they're moving from and where they're moving to. And you can pick from that here if needs be, if you need to change it. And here down below, this is the web version of the invoice with all the line items and the subtotals. Then here at the top, you can see some buttons, PDF. SMMware offers you 3 different formats for your PDFs, and you can pick which format you want on a client-by-client basis. So that way, if you have one client where you feel that they are probably going to push back, the more detail that they see, the more they're going to push back, you can give them the summary version. And this is as bare bones as it's going to get, just one line for every major category. For Anne, question about invoice. So for Anne, you can have like probably I would recommend having a tablet on site if you want to finish the invoice at the end of the day at the job, and then you can. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this PDF. And once you've got the invoice finalized, you can simply send it to them. We have a button right here that says email the invoice. So the client will get an email, the PDF will be attached, and then that would be it. So you can do it through a phone as well. If you're going to be doing very much in the way of typing, it's probably a little nicer on a tablet, but it's very doable from a phone as well. But you can definitely have this on site and then finish up the day's work and finalize the invoice and send it to the client very quickly and easily from the site. So hopefully that answers your question for you, Anne. All right, and let's see, moving on. See if there's anything I have not covered here. Well, we've got the detailed PDF where this has every line item for every employee and every day they worked. And if that gets to be too long, because it's just a bit of a longer job, we also offer you the roll-up version, which rolls up based on the date. So then it's going to show you that on a given date, maybe there was 5 employees, and here's the total hours and the subtotal in terms of dollars. And by doing it that way, it'll be a much shorter invoice. And I think that's particularly good for the really longer jobs. This is the client name right here. And then looking at the invoice, this is the client name again. And that's the address that we selected and put into the system. So for D, hopefully that answers your question. For Susan, you can invoice through QuickBooks Online. SMMware does, and QuickBooks Desktop. SMMware does integrate with both versions of QuickBooks, so you can copy an invoice to QuickBooks. If an invoice has already been copied, it'll have this green icon, the round icon. And if it had not already been copied, there would be a button here that says copy to QuickBooks. So what that will do is it will, in fact, copy the invoice over to QuickBooks, and then you can bill it from there. And then if you wanted to be paid electronically, that's how you would do it. SMMware does not deal directly with money. So if you would like to for your clients to have a link and then they click on it and pay, then you would probably do that through QuickBooks, which is the plan, and that was the idea for integrating with QuickBooks. For Anne, you can create a flat fee invoice, and that would be the way to get an invoice without the employees having entered their hours. But for an itemized invoice, then yeah, somebody has to enter the hours, and then they are pulled into the invoice. All right, I think we've covered the invoices pretty well. So again, that wraps up our first track. We've talked about clients, talked about sales leads. We've talked about jobs. We've talked about entering hours and expenses. We've looked at invoices. And along the way, we did some file uploading. So from here, we will look at organizations and contacts. For Susan, yes, absolutely. Employees would enter their hours, and they would not see the invoice. They would not see how much the invoice is for or how much their hours are resulting in. So when I go to enter my hours, I'm just going to review very briefly for Susan. So I went back to the record my hours section. And here's what the employee would see. They would simply have a place to enter their the date that the work was done, which of these jobs the work was done for, the start and the end time, and then you put in a description, either picking from that list or hand typing something here. But nowhere in here does the employee see anything about how much the client is being charged. So for Susan, that hopefully answers your question. And for Kathy, yes, absolutely, there is a scheduling component. And I'd like to go ahead and cover this organizations and contacts section. It's a pretty short one, and then we're going to move on to the calendaring and the tasks and the calls and things like that. So that there definitely is a component like that, and we're going to be there shortly. So within SMMware, the organization is a company, and all the contacts are the people who work for a given company. The organizations, and also this is also true for the contacts, they are divided up into sections and categories. So that way, if you want to say, well, show me all my real estate people, then it's right there. And you can pop that open and see them. And when you create a record, you can actually assign people to more than one category. So if there is some disagreement about whether they belong under this category or that category, the good news is they can appear under both. Let's go find somebody to take a peek at. So this is an organization's profile. And the usual information is represented here, like the address and their name and so on, website. Here's where you assign a category. And like I said, you can assign multiple categories if you want. And you can create a general note. I'd also like to point out that you can upload files and create tasks for organizations. So if an organization gives you a PDF with all of their standard floor plans, this would be a very logical place to store it, and all the company's employees would hopefully remember that this is a place to go find that information. And you can create tasks saying, well, follow up with them after, next week or the week after that, so on and so forth. This is one of the contacts for this particular organization. We can jump over and look at their details here. We can create a new contact for them as well. Let's go ahead and do that. And one of the things that we track regarding contacts is whether they send business to you. And that information combined with the date of last contact drives a function in SMMware that is intended to keep you in touch with the people that send you business. So here we are looking at a contact, and you can upload files, create tasks, and write notes there as well. All right, so that is the tasks and organizations section. Like I said, that's one of our shorter stops on the tour. So from next, we're going to talk about task notes and calls and the calendar. And I'm actually going to start by talking about tasks. I've come back to the jobs section. There's a variety of places where you can create tasks in SMMware. I'm just going to use the jobs as one example. Here are all the tasks that have been created for this job. And if this was late, the date and time would be in red. If I want to create a new task, there's the button for that right there. If I want to see the details of the tasks, all the different tasks in the system for this job, this button right here called Full Tasks will get you a pop-up, which you can then print out if you want. And it has all the details about that task. So you can look through all of them all at once that way. You can see here who this task is assigned to, who it was created by, and its priority. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new task. Give it a due date. I can set some reminders if I would like. And we've got low, medium, and high priority. Here's where I can assign it to someone other than myself, because that is part of the idea, is to take away some of your work and have your employees take over. One thing that is different between a task like this versus an event that goes on the calendar is that you might finish a task early if you find yourself with some time. So for instance, this one is called Arrange Movers. And if you, even if this is due on the 24th, on the 20th, the 22nd, if you have some time, you might take care of it. In contrast to an event on the calendar where if you say that you want to meet on the 24th, you're not going to show up 2 days early. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And again, here is our list of tasks in the system. We also give you a way to deal with multiple tasks in a convenient fashion. Each one of these buttons right here is called a task group. And underneath that button is multiple tasks. I'm going to go ahead and click on pre-sale. And here we have 1, 2, 3 tasks. And this promotes consistency because the language can be predefined. Who it's assigned to can be predefined if you want. And it will take a guess at the due date for the tasks. But this way, instead of, let's say there's 10 tasks, instead of having to remember all 10 of them and add them to the list, you're going to start off by seeing all 10, and then you can remove the ones that you don't need. So in this case, let's say I don't need this one in the middle, get rid of it. Now we just have 2 tasks. So the task groups, they're a great way to promote consistency, both in not forgetting a given task, but also in the language of any individual task. Here we'll look at the notes. Creating a note is simpler than creating a task. This text down below was predefined in the settings editor, but it is not necessary that you use that if it's not appropriate in this instance. Again, the idea in SMMware, this common thread, is that we'll give you a head start, then you can modify as needed. So if I don't want that, I can just get rid of it and write out something else. Actually, I'm just going to leave that there so it'll have a little more content to it. And you can see who created the note, and you can see when they created a note. That way you get a history, and you can see who created it and when. For Kathleen, you're creating the predefined tasks are at the system level, and there are different stages. So if you were customizing the tasks per job, then that's really no different than creating tasks one at a time from here, right? So you can definitely have different tasks for every single different job with completely different set of tasks, different language. But if you're creating them at that point or that level, then you could just do it from here. There wouldn't be any help if we define them at the system level, if that makes sense. All right, so that's tasks and notes. We also have a section for calls. So if somebody calls you, you can write down some notes about it. And of course, in this case, you want to record a phone number. And you want to know if you're calling them or they're calling you. And if somebody called you off the cuff, then this call is in the past, and you can just write down when it was. If it's in the future, then the date you set here would, of course, be in the future, and it would also be useful to create some reminders. Now here I'm going to jump to the home page to discuss a few of the sections that you find there. And here's a section called My Task. Each employee has this section. Here's an example of a task that is now running late, so it's in red. And this will only show tasks that are assigned to me, whether I created them or someone else created and assigned it to me. The next section has tasks which I did create, but I assigned it to somebody else. So here's where I can keep in touch with those. The next section is called All Unfinished Tasks. So the first 2 sections, every employee has their own version of that, but this is something that is more for an admin or company owner. And it shows you everything across the entire system. And it gives you a sense of how busy your company is and whether they're keeping up on their tasks. We also have a section, again, for the admins and company owners called Tasks Recently Completed. And if the task was completed within the last 5 days, it would appear here. And this gives you a convenient place to go find those and verify that, yes, they are now marked as done. There's a similar section for My Calls. I mentioned that the invoices can be approved. So if I was a team lead on a job and there was an invoice ready for approval, it would appear here. I can go look at that and edit the status to say approved. I mentioned the optional hours and expense approval. So if I was the team lead and so one of my jobs had some hours entered against it, I would come here and I can see that I need to go view them and approve them. If I was the employee who made the entry and the entry got rejected, then it's going to appear here so I can edit that. And the team lead would have written me a note explaining why they rejected it. And that item will bounce back and forth between these two sections until everybody's happy with it. Under the next two sections, we've got one for the teams where I'm the team lead. And it's common for somebody to be the team lead on one job, but a team member on another job. So we give you one of those sections as well. When we're looking at contacts, I mentioned that we keep track of who refers business to you and the last time that you spoke to them. This section right here will show you the contacts where they send you business, but it's been the longest since you've spoken to them. And that way the idea here is that you would work through this list on a periodic basis. And so it's been January since I spoke to this person. I better get on the phone and see how they're doing. And this avoids a situation where, somebody who sends you business is now mad at you. And then they're even more mad because you haven't even noticed because you're so busy. All you have to do is keep in touch with this section, review it on a periodic basis, and you can avoid that kind of a problem. So here's our section for clients who are willing to act as a reference. When we're looking at the client profile, I pointed out a field where you can mark them as willing to act as a reference or not. So if you go into a sales call, then you can take this list, and if somebody asks you for a referral, then you can use that, or reference rather. And this second section, it shows you clients where the job is now over, but you have not yet marked it as whether they're willing to act as a reference or not. So by keeping this second list up to date, then it will keep the first one up to date. So we're going to be talking about calendars now. And one of the ways that you can manage the attendees is via invites. And if I was invited to an event, then I would see that here. And I could mark it as one that I'm interested in or not interested in from here. And I can change that status up until the point where it's assigned. So again, we're on the home page and we're at the very bottom. And this is my schedule. So this is going to show you the events where you are the attendee. And it would also show you the events where you are the main contact, if that applies. Like if you're the person in the company who does scheduling, or if you're a team lead and you do your own scheduling, then you might see events here, even if you're not an attendee. Again, this is the homepage, My Schedule section. If my associate profile allows it, then I'll have this calendar item, so I can go to look at the calendar. And I think I'll sidestep for a moment to look at an associate profile, just so you can see the permissions that we're talking about. And while we're here, I'll mention that SMMware supports the idea of multiple pay levels. So if you pay somebody differently when they're a team member versus when they're a team lead, then SMMware can understand that. And if you do not use the job codes, then it has a straightforward approach to how it knows whether it's going to pay them for a team lead or team member based on whether they are the job. If they're marked in the job as being the team lead, and then they put in hours against it, they'll be paid at the team lead level. And SMMware also allows you to pay them more on the weekends if you so desire. If you are using job codes, then you can get a lot even fancier in terms of your pay levels. And so you can have more pay levels defined. You can tie them into different job codes. We originally came here to look at permissions, and that's this section right here. I mentioned that people may or may not have access to the master calendar, and that is the scheduling role. And this particular person has read-write permissions, but they might just have read permissions, or they might just have none. And you can decide that on an employee-by-employee basis. And while we're here, I'll point out that you can, SMMware helps you with your HR. You can upload files. So for instance, if there's some sort of report and then that gets written about an employee, then you can scan it and you can upload it and put it under the employee's profile here under the file manager. And only people with HR permissions can see this information. You can create tasks such as, it's time for that yearly review. And you can just create general notes. So again, that is the employee profile right here. We also have some custom fields here, so maybe you want to store emergency contact information, but it's customizable, so you can do what you want with those fields. All right, so coming back to the home page, I was about to click on the calendar button. We'll do that now. So this is the master calendar, and it is showing you everything across the entire company. An aspect of SMMware's calendaring system is that we want you to use colors to know something about events. It's very, very helpful visually. And we have seen 3 basic approaches for how to use the different tags. The tags are customizable for color, for the label, and whether they're tied to sales leads or to jobs. One of the simplest approach is to distinguish between an event that is for a job versus an event that is for a sales meeting. So that would be the green and the tan. So like this entry on the 1st and this one on the 7th. Another approach we have seen is to distinguish between the kinds of work being done. So for instance, we've got pack and unpack. So these purple are packing days. This dark green is the unpacking day. And then the third approach that I mentioned was to distinguish between the team leads. So this shade of blue is Judy. So here's the day that Judy's the team lead. This brown is for Carmen, and the darker blue is for Margot. I would also point out that we can mark events as being tentative, which results in a thin red outline, as seen here. When you look at an individual event, the first name here is the client name. And then the who refers to the attendees, and you can see their initials. For Susan, when we're looking at a client profile, you can assign a color at the client profile, and that would override the tag that you assign to the event. And then all your client, or for a given client, all their events would have that color. So coming back here to a client profile, this particular client has this kind of a dark reddish brown. And if I create an event for them, then that event would have that color, no matter what tag you assign to it. So the short answer is yes, you can easily work with, you can easily set it up so that all your clients, or for a given client, all their events have the same color. For Kathy, there is not a way in SMMware to bump that up. You can use the browsers function to increase the text size. So SMMware is a web site, and your browser functions work on it there. So I'm on a Windows machine, and if I hit Control and plus, then I can increase and decrease font sizes. So that's not really formally within SMMware, but that is a way you can manage your font sizes. So I'm back here on the calendar, and when I click on a given event, I can see all the details. Down at the bottom, I can see more about the attendees. SMMware has different ways of managing the attendees. This particular one, we're assigning shifts, and so therefore you can see when they are starting and ending their shifts. We also have a quick link back to the job profile, so you can get more information if needs be. And we also have a link to a map. So let's say that you're on your phone and you click on the map link. We are essentially handing you over to the mapping function on your phone. Maybe it's Google Maps, maybe it's Apple Maps. So you will get your turn-by-turn GPS directions, but you are getting it from your phone's app as opposed to SMMware directly. And then when you're done, you can just close that tab and come back to SMMware. So I'm going to open up a new event now. And I'm going to pick one of the tags, in this case, the job tag. And because I'm attaching this to a job, I'm going to pick which job. And because SMMware knows the address that they're moving from, it knows the address that they're moving to, we can pick these links for inserting the current address of the new address. And from here, all you have to do is leave that little bit of code alone. When we hit save and go back to the main screen, that becomes the link that takes you to the map. We can assign somebody as the main contact. And what that means is that when people are notified about the event, the notification is going to end by saying, hey, if you have questions, talk to this person. Here's their name, their phone number, and their email address. We can set up a couple of reminders. And we can assign a color directly if you want to override the tag's color. We can skip notifications if we want to. Notifications in SMMware are handled via email and text messages. This is where you would mark the event as tentative if you wanted to. And lastly, I'm going to talk about how we manage the attendees. So we've got the 3 different ways, and each one has its own underlying way of thinking about things. The direct approach assumes that, that you already spoke about it either at a company meeting or on the ride home. So you really just need to formalize it and put it into the system. So the notification for this is simply going to say you are assigned to this event. Under this particular approach, you're not looking for SMMware to help you with any back and forth and figuring out who's going to attend. The next approach is called invite, and we would set a team size. And one way of using this is to invite, let's say, 6 people, and then 5 people say that they would like to do the work. And then there's a final step where you would pick the 3 that you actually want. The other ways that you can use this is for first come, first serve. And you can also do multiple rounds of invitation where you invite the 3 people that you really want to do the work. And then if one of them can't make it, you come back here and you invite another person. And that's when they get their notification. So for Danielle, yes, SMMware can send text notifications. So that's the invite, the invite-based approach. And the last one I'll talk about is availability. Here we have a list of the employees down the side. And then we have a green bar that represents the time that they're available. So here's the timeline. And so most of the people are available for most of the day. This particular person has an event from 2 to 3. So we would not be able to pick them and assign them a shift there. Here's what it's like to create a shift. First, I click on the green bar, and then I grab that shift and I stretch it to match what I want as the beginning and the end of the shift. And this is our fanciest approach because it assumes that people are leaving and are coming and going at different times. The other 2 approaches do have an assumption that everybody's arriving at the same time and everybody's leaving at the same time. All right, so then when I click save on this, the notifications would normally go out, but I did hit skip. This icon here indicates that we are integrated with Google Calendar. So when you are integrated with Google Calendar, you would still use SMMware for the planning, but you can go to Google Calendar to see that those events combined with other events. Like you can share that company calendar so that people can combine it under their personal calendar. And Google does not understand about the clients. It doesn't have any information about the employees or when they're available. So that's why you still create the events in SMMware. Let me see if I can go find an example of an invite. Just one moment. All right, so for Catherine, this is an invite, and it gives details about the event. And it says, if you are interested, please click here. If you are not interested, please click there. And then when they do that, it opens up a browser window and acknowledges that they've indicated that they are or are not interested in that event. For Kathy, let me come back to your question in just a moment. Under the availability approach, people are going into SMMware and they are going to indicate when they are unavailable. Say, let's say Friday the 11th or the next week. Maybe they're not available that Friday morning or Monday afternoon, something like that. So they are telling SMMware ahead of time when they can and cannot work. So then when you come into here, you are essentially assigning them to this event. It is not really the case where they are going to decline. The event approach is where people are getting an invite and they say, yes, I'm interested, or no, I'm not. The availability approach, the way of thinking there is that they have already told you that they can work on that in that time frame, so then you are free to assign them. The availability approach does rely on your employees to put in that information and keep it up to date. For Susan, the availability or the invite approach involves them saying yes, they're interested, or no, they're not. The direct approach is an assignment situation, and the availability approach is an assignment situation. For Stephen, so you're bringing us to our discussion about Zapier. So SMMware directly integrates with a number of products. It integrates with Google Calendar, as I mentioned. It also integrates with QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. But we now also integrate with Zapier, which is kind of a middleware. So SMMware will tell Zapier that something has happened, then Zapier tells something else. And then under that approach, you are having an account with Zapier, and then you personally are telling Zapier that, hey, when SMMware tells me there's a new event, then you would tell Zapier, let Microsoft Outlook know about this event, and Zapier would copy the information into your Outlook calendar. So the short answer for Stephen is yes, SMMware can work with Microsoft Outlook calendar. It just would have to go through Zapier, but it can. For Danielle, in order to send text messages, we would go to the associate profile. We'd come down to this section. It says contact via email, text, and then typically people would put both. You put both because the events are where SMMware will send email and text. But for other things like tasks, those just go out via email. So you'd probably put both. And after you put in that you want them to be contacted via text, you do, of course, naturally need a phone number. And because SMMware does not want to send out text messages to somebody's home phone, we ask that you put in the words cell or mobile. And I'm putting my mouse over this little question mark. You'll see these little question marks all over the place. If you hold your mouse over it, it'll give you what's known as a tooltip. You don't click on it, you just hold it over it. And it'll give you a little pop-up with information. So here is where it's telling us that if it's for texting purposes, put in cell or mobile. So you don't have to exactly memorize everything I tell you. You can when looking at a given screen, you can use these question marks. And of course, we also have the online help. Before I wind things down, I know that we're right at 2 o'clock and I don't want to keep you much past that. SMMware also integrates with MailChimp so that you can use their mass email tools if you want to keep in touch with your clients via mass emails that way. And also through Zapier, we can work with Constant Contact. Now I was just going to jump over to the SMMware corporate site. And if you were here, if you were at the point of signing up, you would go to the pricing and sign up page. And here you can see the different levels. And we base pricing on the number of active users. If you have seasonal people, you can mark them as inactive when they're out of town so they don't count towards your quota. Also here under the company section, here is Liz. She's on our session today. Say hi, Liz, if you hear me. And this is contact information for her. She is separate from SMMware, but she has been put through the ringer by us so that we're guaranteeing that she knows what she's doing if you call on her for help. And she can help you both with the initial planning, because there's a lot of things you can customize in SMMware, all the different lists, and also with training, you know, like how to get through how to click through the different sections and get to where you want to go. But both for the planning and for the training of usage, she can help you with either of those. Also for data import, for instance, we can import data through CSV files and through QuickBooks. For Kathy, yes, that was Liz at the conference with me. Going back to our subscribe page, I've mentioned that there is no yearly commitment, no annual commitment. There's no setup fee. It's simply month to month. And we also have here under the company section, we have manuals. So we've got the manuals as web pages, and we have them as PDFs. And also on the SMMware homepage, there's a section called YouTube, and it says click here to see our YouTube channel. Oh, I clicked on the webinars link, but that's fine. I'll go to the YouTube directly. You just go to youtube.com/SMMware and probably go to the playlists as opposed to the individual videos. I would highly recommend that you subscribe so that you know when we mount new videos. But I would go to the playlist and look at the overview. And here on the right-hand side, you've got a whole long list of videos that some of them are 2-minute introduction, 15-minute introduction. This session will be mounted here either later today or tomorrow. But we also have topic-specific videos, how to manage your associates, how to deal with pay levels. So between the manuals, between the YouTube videos, and then also we have Liz. So whatever your preferred way of learning is, I believe that SMMware has it pretty well covered. So we are kind of winding down. If anybody's got any final questions, I'd be happy to answer those. For Kathy, yes, SMMware is a website, whether you're using it on a desktop like this or whether you're on a mobile device. When you're on a mobile device, you can create a shortcut on your desktop so that you tap on it and it'll open SMMware. So the user experience is just like using an app. But in truth, it is just like a website. But the line between an app and a website is becoming more blurred all the time. All right, so if there's any final questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, if other questions come up later, here on the home page, you can see here's the phone number to call. And of course, we have a contact us page that you can use to get in touch with me. But other than that, I thank you for your time today. And I hope that you learned a lot about what SMMware can do for you and hopefully hear from you sometime soon. Everybody have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Bye now.